Zweig Group invites all AEC industry leaders to the 2024 AEC Small Business and Entrepreneurship Forum, the premier event for small firms in the AEC sector. Experience innovative strategies and insights on May 21st, crafted by Zweig Group's industry experts. Engage in keynotes and interactive sessions focused on recruitment, retention, and business growth. Join Zweig Group for this unique networking opportunity and take your business to new heights. Secure your spot today and be part of the AEC industry's future. Visit zweiggroup.com for more information. The Zweig Group team looks forward to welcoming you.
Welcome to the Zweig Letter Podcast, putting architectural, engineering, planning, and environmental consulting experts straight talk in your ear. These podcasts deliver great interviews with industry leaders and Zweig Group's 3 decades of invaluable research, leadership, management, marketing, client, and HR advice directly to you, free of charge. The Zweig Letter Podcasts let you develop personally and professionally, wherever you are.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Zweig Letter Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and I'm excited. I can't believe it's already fall and there's so much going on, the Christmas of the air and all that good stuff. But I'm excited to have on here today none other than Brenden Sherrer, who is part of our M&A team here at Zweig Group and an outstanding individual in his own right, who has really graced us here at Zweig Group with a lot of energy and enthusiasm and great ideas. And so I asked Brenden to come on to the podcast today to kind of share what he's been doing, what he's been up to lately, just to also give you a little insight into what's going on in the minds of different ones that work here at Zweig Group, subject matter experts, leaders, the growing group of the youth movement here at Zweig that's really kind of taking over the design industry. And I'm really excited to have Brenden on. And I've had some of his other colleagues like Noah and others. Of course, Jamie Claire Kaiser, the head of Director of Consulting here at Zweig Group and also the head of the M&A department. But Brenden, man, it's so glad to have you back on the podcast.
I'm happy to be here. I'll speak faster too. Will Sneer from Big Red Dog told me I needed to
speak faster.
Yeah,
right? That's fine.
That.
You're from Southern Arkansas, so that's okay. We give you a pass on that, so it's all good. But anyway, today I wanted to just check in with you, see what was going on. And there are a couple of things that you've been working on lately here internally that I thought it would be worth sharing with our listening audience. Mm-hmm. And a couple of things that I'd like to talk about today is just kind of the state of M&A in the design industry, because things seem to be moving fast and furious. Every time I look up, we've got another deal closing. There are a lot of things happening. Mm-hmm. Be curious for you to kind of give some insight into what you are seeing in the industry. And also, for those that are listening that may be positioning their firm for acquisition or positioning their firm because they want to acquire another firm, what does it take to set your firm up for success, to be ready for everything that is entailed in a proper merger and or acquisition? So I'd love to get your thoughts on that. Also want to talk, because you are a millennial, and it's this buzzword that we talk about all the time, is this millennial mindset. I thought it would be good for you to kind of share your thoughts on it and give some insight, especially to some of those firm leaders and other senior leaders in design firms that are maybe struggling with, properly communicating with individuals from your generation. And not to say that you speak a totally different language than somebody else, but I think it's just important to understand the differences in a firm you have generational differences.
Absolutely.
And you can ignore them at your own peril.
Right.
And so I'd love to just get your thoughts on that and just find out what you think about that. But let's just get started. This state of M&A here in the design industry right now, as of the end of the third quarter of 2018. What are you experiencing? What are you seeing right now?
Well, I believe when I first began, there was the realization of kind of a depressed market when it came to talent in areas that you don't have a foothold in.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the remedies was to look for strategic acquisitions, not just for expansion of services, entry into new markets, new geographic reach, but also just as a human resource addition. And so with that, there was in my opinion, increasing interest in what M&A could mean for my firm. And that mindset, it had its infancy, and so there was not a lot of education in mass around the subject. But gradually over time, over the last few years, increasingly there's been better education on M&A and what it could mean. Some of the fears have been dispelled. Some of the preparation necessary to have success has been done. More strategic plans, it seems, have a component of M&A, at least as a discussion, if not an outright plan, and in some cases an absolutely devoted committee or employee to M&A. And so over time, it's went from interest to education to execution. And ultimately, it serves as a great way to expand all of those classical areas of growth. Like I said, geography, service, markets, youthful expertise, new technology. A lot of that can be killed with M&A. A lot of those things can be satisfied with M&A.
Yeah, I mean it is certainly the elixir that cures a lot of the problems and challenges that this industry faces. I know last year at the Hot Firm event, and I'm sure this year will be the same issue, when we polled these are the most successful firms in the design industry. I mean, firms that are operating at triple digit growth. I mean, these guys are not playing any games, but their biggest concern is recruitment and retention.
Yep. And also, it's funny, the parallel for success, whether it be organic growth or inorganic growth, I think comes down to, at least on the M&A side, integration. That's where we say the value is realized. It's tough to find a fit, but even if you find the perfect fit, if the integration plan and execution isn't there, that value won't be fully realized.
Yeah.
So integration, yes, in a acquisition or merger sense, is critical to value realization. But even in an organic perspective, some of the same principles that make integration successful, like making sure you have cultural fit, making sure you motivate those who may have had some apathy in their workday, be able to reorganize offices to wring out inefficiencies. Some of these things, consolidate systems, get rid of duplicative accounts in technology. All of those things, even though they make for successful integration, from an organic perspective, they can make for the bettering of a firm, even if you don't choose M&A. So I think the marriage of both in the eyes of firm leaders has allowed for better retention, but also has allowed for better integration when M&A is chosen.
Yeah. No, I mean, and there's so many moving parts that go into a proper M&A transaction, and you guys are back there busy on the phones all the time. And I've always said, because I cut my teeth in executive search, that M&A and executive search there are a lot of similarities, in terms of the amount of time that you have to spend on the phone, and you're chasing so many opportunities, so many different individuals, so many different organizations to see if they're appropriate, and we're out looking for candidates for firms. We're looking at, we cast the net wide and far.
Absolutely.
To see if things will pan out.
And before I sat down for this podcast, I had a couple calls. I had 3 calls this morning. And just from when I began to now, we talk about the evolution of M&A and its understanding in the industry, the depth of questions, the good questions, the concerns, what's the story, the questions particularly about specifics on finances have become better. They get you to the answer faster. You're not wasting as much time. So I think the education of the industry and the awareness of M&A as a component of growth has led to better questions, better interactions amongst prospective partners, and ultimately has somewhat reduced the amount of time it takes to execute a transaction because of the overall increase in awareness.
Yeah. Wow. Well, there's a lot there to unpack, and I know that we always hear that that constant discussion about the importance of culture, and you mentioned it earlier. How much time do you guys spend on kind of explaining to firms that aspect of culture and not to overlook it? You know, where when you get some firm leaders that are just hyper focused on what the end result is going to be from a financial or a numbers perspective, but they ultimately can ignore the cultural impact at their own peril. Is that correct?
Yeah, so on the buy side, culture is important because, number one, if you're growing, you're thriving, you don't want to upset the internal culture really without any reason to do so. Shakeups are good when things are getting stale, but if you're growing constantly and at a good clip, just kind of frivolously injecting someone else's culture into your own can be detrimental, not only to the transaction, but to the legacy company. From a sales side, ultimately, a buyer wants to know they can work with you.
Yeah.
They also want to know how much impact on a day-to-day basis as a leader do you have on the tone and tenor of a firm. And that comes off very clearly in our introduction calls or in overall in-person meetings. So we try to coach. That's why we like to have a kickoff meeting. We want to go in and understand your culture. We want to be able to coach you up on the importance of not hiding some of the things you do. Like, what are you looking at internally? What are the mechanisms you have, whether it be employee surveys, whether it be client surveys? Are you heavily invested in marketing, and what does that mean? Is that just marketing of services? Is that bolstering your brand, or are you marketing experts as employees? What is that mix? How do people feel a part of the growth or the life of the firm? All of these things, those are the intangible things that numbers can't show that are critical for integration. And so experienced buyers who have a history of successful transactions as well as successful integration, they ask those questions. And so to kind of go back to my earlier point, that evolution and education on M&A doesn't just come from a transactional perspective. It's learning those ins and outs of what, from an intangible perspective, is needed for ultimate success, both in the transaction and in the integration. And then you also want to maintain, from a key client perspective, if you're not in a particular geographic market, you don't want to totally upset the established clients of that firm that you're looking at. You want to make sure that they still feel that the company that they knew and how they operated is going to continue to do so.
Right.
And so it's a fine line there, but the people who get it right are the ones who can grow exponentially because they have an integration process. They've had experience in it. They can get people going faster, which increases the payback period to realize the value, and ultimately allows you to move on to another transaction with more confidence and with less paranoia internally.
Yeah, because nobody likes change.
No one likes change.
No one likes change. Everybody likes status quo and things to go the way that they've always gone. So if I've worked with a firm for the last 15, 20 years and then they get acquired, my first concern as a customer and or a client is, are they going to still serve me and serve my needs the way that I experienced it in the past? And that's a real issue. And I know that you have to work hard to preserve that type of trust and relationship.
And also doing the due diligence. Sometimes the internal culture of a target firm isn't what the employees want it to be.
Right.
And so being aware of that is is important because you can use integration as kind of that watershed moment to where we right the ship that everyone in the way that everyone needs it to be righted. So you can actually take advantage of this opportunity. I don't like to look at it as change. I like to look at it as additions to an already thriving culture. And I think the words you use and how you present it is very critical, even though sometimes it may be overlooked because it's not quantitative. So how do you announce it to the firm? Have you done the due diligence to identify who the key members inside a firm, not from an org chart perspective, but who drives the culture and the feel? And that could be at the bottom or the top of the org chart. So understanding who's key to buy in is important. And asking those questions of a firm leader actually allows you to understand how much grasp he has on kind of the culture itself. So it can get complex when you talk about it, but ultimately I think approaching these transactions both academically but also with an element of emotion, which I don't like, but you got to be aware that it's just the reality of it. And you have to be aware of the things, even if sometimes emotions can make decisions a little bit harder. You can't ignore them.
Yeah, and everybody's got a personality. I mean, you've got there's so many balls in the air that you're juggling to try to make this work, and so it's never easy. And I'm just amazed, and that actually allows us to switch gears a bit as we start talking about personnel and about some of the things that you guys have seen, because that group back there, and as I refer back to the back section of our office where the M&A lounge is, if you will, and those guys work hard back there. You've added some new people, and you did some unique things in this past year to add this Extern program, which was something I had never even heard of. I was like, what is an Extern? And then you brought in some really amazing, and we've featured some of them on the podcast. You brought some really amazing law school interns in to kind of help out. And we just recently went through the second cycle of these guys, I think, and they just did their presentation a couple of weeks ago. We brought in Wright's Barbecue. We made an afternoon of it and had a really good time and really learned some new things from these guys. And I love the way you're utilizing these law students to help the team out and also just help the overall company out. And so I'd love for you just to kind of speak to that and just to that idea and how it is really kind of taken on a life of its own and what you ultimately think the impact is and how other firms might be able to start a program themselves. And we know a lot of design firms do internship programs, but is there even an opportunity for design firms to bring in individuals from a legal background to help out in ways that maybe they haven't considered in the past?
Well, number one, it was important to myself and Jamie as well, as we're legally educated, which was its own hell to go through.
Yeah,
but we just know that practical experience can not only help the firm, but also help students get through the grind. Seeing what completion can mean before it's done is important, because it allows that light at the end of the tunnel to be more apparent sooner. But what we want to do is continue to build expertise. And one of the things that's important to me is how young professionals function in today's environment. I try not to say millennials anymore. I try to say young professionals.
We're going to talk about millennials in a minute.
And being able to train people in that age group allows for us internally to understand where the market is going and what it's going to take to lead a particular group of people that are going to be the lion's share of the workforce in short order. Also, like I said, building on expertise. So previously we just kind of went a little bit more in depth on non-disclosure agreements and covenants not to compete, right? We all face them. We face NDAs quite often. I know from an executive search perspective, you have to have a grasp of non-competes and just any organization, especially with growth. You don't want talent leaving, and not only leaving, but leaving with information, clientele, and other things that you've helped build. And build up to help the firm grow. So from here, we wanted to have even more depth for the students to understand stock purchase agreements and asset agreements, but also learn how to not speak at the legalese level, but be able to consult from it. So taking expertise, synthesizing that information down in a way that allows for firm leaders to totally understand the topic. That's critical for consultants. That's what makes Zweig Group so good at what we do from a consulting perspective. We can take complex problems or complex issues or complex strategic situations and be able to give our opinion and consult to it in a simplified way. We don't want to confuse our clients so they don't know really what we're saying. We want to be very clear, very concise, course of action in place, how we're going to execute it, and then have good communications on that execution throughout the process. And so that's kind of how I attack somewhat leading these externs, is not giving every marching order down on a piece of paper, but making them feel comfortable with ambiguity, to develop that problem-solving mind, to be able to take small pieces and put together a strategic vision and ultimately be able to speak to, like I said, complex issues and infuse that into the current case that we face with a client. And that's important to me. I think that is something that every firm should do, whether you're on the consulting side or on the firm side where we work with, is to be able to anticipate what the job market is going to look like, be able to teach to that market, then be able to take that market and infuse your culture into it and the way you approach business and clients. That's critical. That is basically what makes a firm successful in the long term, and we want to do that and do that with some of the most talented and bright students that we have in our area.
Yeah, and you guys are certainly doing it, because I was blown away by the group the guys that you brought in the first time, and then the group you had this summer, and I know you've got some outstanding young women coming in this fall, so I'll be excited to see what they present and what they learn through this process, and then whatever they learn, I end up learning. So
and we also they have deliverables, so they know how to consolidate information in memo form so it can be easily recalled. And I'm also I'm proud of the diversity we've had in these first 6 choices. We've had women, we've had diverse backgrounds from a racial perspective, diverse backgrounds from a education perspective. So it's very cool to see finance backgrounds, construction backgrounds, marketing backgrounds, analyst backgrounds, as well as the demographic diversity. So that's something I'm proud of that we're doing here at Zweig Group, and it gives fresh perspectives in a good way. Yeah, it kind of helps to avoid monothink and to come up with some diversity of thought. Absolutely, which is important. So, well, why don't we just and kudos to you for that. Again, if I haven't told you that before, I think I've told you that personally, but I've just been beyond impressed with everything that you've done with this Extern program. And folks, if you ever want to learn more about that, you need to reach out and connect with Brenden, and we'll make sure that his contact information are in the show notes so that you can connect with him directly to ask him some additional questions and get some additional feedback from him, and just see if it's maybe something right for your organization. You just never know. Every design firm deals with legal matters, legal issues, and it might be good just to have somebody come through from time to time and maybe see where your areas of shortcoming are when it comes to that, and to just to kind of help you out and add some stability to your organization from a legal standpoint. Absolutely. So it's definitely worth looking at. So and they're hungry too.
Yes,
that's the thing.
I know, because and honestly, I think it's good. It's good for the externs, because a lot of these guys are facing a job market that is problematic at best. I know a lot of people that are graduating from law school that don't want to be practicing lawyers. And, you want to create other opportunities. And there are a lot of ways that you can take a legal education, a legal mind, and leverage that into different areas of business. So there's a lot of flexibility there. So finally, let's talk about the the millennial. You are a millennial. How old are you again? I forget. So
I'm 28.
You're 28. So you're right in the throes of it. And I like it because you're exactly 20 years younger than me, and 21 years younger than me, actually. So, but I like the fact that you bring a different perspective to things. And I know that we talk about it all the time. Like, these millennials are walking around with like horns on their heads and everything like that. And I just find it funny. I mean, there's so many articles out there about millennials. I mean, honestly, somebody raised these millennials.
Right.
And another generation raised the kids that we're calling millennials today. So I think folks, need to remember that. So it's not like these kids just grew up in a test tube somewhere. These kids are formed. Their opinions are formed. Their lives are somewhat dictated by the people that raised them.
Absolutely.
And that was another generation. Probably a lot of people in my generation, and then some. So, and that's neither here nor there. But it's just the bottom line that we can't forget that. But I think you bring a healthy perspective on this, and I would just love for you to kind of share some of your thoughts about the best ways that firm leaders in the design space, whether you're a project manager, senior project manager, a principal at a design firm, and you're trying to make sense of working with different younger people on your staff, and for some reason or another, you just feel like you cannot get through to them. I want a millennial to give you the real 411 on maybe some best practices and some things that you can do. And I know you have some other thoughts and ideas you'd like to share as well.
So my first TZL articles were on this topic, and I'm currently writing on it. I think it comes down to three things, simply put. It comes down to trust in the organization and leadership, choice, and that's choice means multiple things. That could be choice in work-life balance, choice in PTO and time schedules, but I think more critically it's choice in personality, choice in approach, being comfortable with the fact that everyone doesn't communicate the same. They don't approach problems the same. They don't see opportunities the same. They don't their risk appetite is the same. So being comfortable with the variety that I think is healthy for an organization, being comfortable with it. And then purpose, which we talked about, I think I've talked about previously. Purpose is important. What is the purpose of the firm? What are we doing to satisfy that purpose? And where do I fit as an individual within the firm in that plan to execute on the purpose that drives an organization? I think those are the three things that are most important. There are others, but I think those are the most critical things. From a communication perspective, I think young professionals are more hands-on. If you ask them a question, if you ask their opinion, they're going to give it to you. The days of just kind of being a formality, you asked the audience, but you didn't really expect the audience to push back or really answer. Just expected them to kind of parrot the decisions of leadership. Those days are over for most people. Now, young professionals have to know the proper decorum to take to that to color that mindset. But I think leaders also have to be comfortable with pushback and see it as an opportunity to have true depth behind decision making.
Right.
Because if someone asks you why and you can't answer, that's really not the young professional's problem. That decision probably should be made with a why in mind, and then it can start to condition organizations to be very deliberate in decision making. I kind of spoke to choice. Trust. I think trust is important, obviously, and I don't mean it in a cliche perspective. It's how consistent are choices internally? How consistent is performance being rewarded? How consistent is our efforts to grow in relation to the strategy that was laid out in the beginning? And we deal with it internally, but from a AEC perspective, that is something that I'm not quite sure that it's as deliberate as it needs to be. And I think that's something that firm leaders would do well in assessing. And it doesn't mean that you're not. It just may mean the approach and the delivery and communication of strategy and direction may not be being relayed properly. I don't think with the mix of employees in most organizations now, from a cultural perspective, that a one-size-fits-all communication strategy is it's easier probably, but I don't think it's going to be the most successful. And so you may have to personalize a vision more now for young professionals. It may not just be an organizational vision and you kind of figure out where you fit in. People want to know what you think. Where do you see me?
Yeah.
What do you think of me and how do I fit in? If I'm doing well, then where can I improve? What's next for me? Have I topped out at this level? I don't want to top out at 28, just to put my age in there. If I was in an organization and I felt like the ceiling was being reached already, then that's something that probably isn't going to appeal, and that's also something that is going to be observed by other young professionals in the office.
Yeah.
And so whether it be a survey crew where the majority are 55, 60, and you got a young professional who really likes it and is a part of a survey crew, can you communicate to the 60-year-old the same way you do a 30-year-old? Probably not.
Yeah.
Technology's probably changed. Interactions have probably changed. All of these things have probably changed. You can't ignore it. And so I think that's important as well. So it's just being able to kind of step outside of the classical way of thinking, not look at having to answer individual questions or personalized requests as a negative, but looking at it as a changing landscape, and also use it as an opportunity to change how you interact with customers. Increasingly, you're going to have to tailor what you do to a particular client.
Yeah.
And so if you do that both internally and externally, I think you're setting yourself up for growth that most firms won't realize because they won't make those steps. You can't send the same proposal out or the same have that same approach in a business development for everyone.
Right.
You're going to have to be able to tailor things, and that's not just with clients, that's also with employees.
Yeah. You've said a lot there, and you've unpacked quite a bit in terms of how you would work with and learn from millennials, and you're absolutely right about the communication piece. And it's one thing that I tell, and when I do our project management training here at Zweig Group, when we do it in-house and go out and work with other firms, we tell people that you can ignore generational differences at your own peril. If you understand how best to communicate to someone from a different generation, then you can get through to them. But if you try to impress upon them your way or preferred method of communication as the only way, then you really run the risk of not being heard by that individual and or respected. And I always use the story of interacting with some people in this particular office here at Zweig Group. And, we have ranges of age here at Zweig Group, but primarily this is a younger office. Right. But I know that if I want to reach most of the younger people in here, if I text them, I'll get the quickest response ever. I don't need to pop in and see them. Now, there are other individuals that I will pop in and see, but I also understand that a lot of the younger people respond quicker and respond better without a pop-in, without a, just coming over to see you or, asking you a question about this or that. You can get a quicker response via text than you can doing anything else. And some of you may say, well, that doesn't, but I should be able to just go and talk to someone face to face. And yeah, certainly there's a time for that, but understanding the general method of communication for an individual and where they flow the best and what is easiest for them, that may be the case. Texting might just be a better option for them, and it doesn't take anything away from the work product.
I've written about it in my next article about matching communication methods. And what I mean by that is, for me, I don't really like communicating via email internally, right? I just like to interact face to face. But you have to be able to adapt. And when I say meet communication with communication, if I come by your office and things are busy for you, my boss may not come to my office,
Right.
but the invitation to come back is important. If I call you and you're too busy, I would like a call back. If I email you, then an email's fine.
Right.
But there is a hierarchy when it comes to communication that when it can be matched, I think that's best.
Right.
It just shows a level of respect there. And I think one characteristic that it would make me comfortable if I was a leader of largely millennial employees is, I don't think, generally speaking, we're as deferential to the leader's preferred, their singular method of approaching things.
Right.
There is a desperation to balance both how I would like things to be done and how you like things to be done. And that for certain can be frustrating for a leader. And that is something that I do think, generally speaking, young professionals have to get a little bit better at understanding that you're not the driver all the time. But those who can kind of split that as 50-50 as possible while not ceding over authority or things like that will have the most success, because everybody's approaches aren't the same. And if you meet differing approaches with frustration or dismissiveness, then it could kill all hunger that a young professional has. And it's also important to mean it when you're soliciting ideas.
Absolutely. Don't give lip service.
Don't give lip service, because one thing I do believe young professionals are doing more now is holding leadership accountable for what they say.
Yeah, absolutely. Which means you don't forget what you say. Just keep that in mind. So, and if you make a mistake, you need to own it and be the first person to say, "Hey, mea culpa. I made a mistake. Forgive me. I know we said we were going to do X. We ended up doing Y. That's on me. It's not a reflection of you or anything you did. You, as a leader, real leaders, first of all, real leaders eat last, and real leaders own their stuff. And as I said to somebody the other day, real leaders are also the first ones to fall on the sword.
Right.
You know, I tell people all the time that I'm bloody. I just walk around with a patch on my stomach because I'm always constantly falling on a sword where I've made a mistake or done something, and I just own it and say, hey, it's on me. We'll figure it out. And the minute that you try to cast blame elsewhere, that becomes problematic. And no one's going to fight for you if you constantly come off that way. And so
consistency.
And
that isn't a millennial young professional thing. I think that's just an overall leadership thing. Consistency in decision making. People can see when decisions aren't consistent, when a similar set of facts yielded two totally different results. That information is logged, and it can be used against you as a leader moving forward. It's unfortunate, but that's just kind of how it is. I know personally, I can't speak for all young professionals in this regard, I am a little bit more forward than most. And I think there's an increasing number, although I think it's still a smaller number, of people who are willing to be a little bit more upfront, risk a little bit more to articulate what they want. And leaders have to be totally okay with that.
Yeah. That
expressing, and this is a discussion I've had with kind of my group of friends, is when you're sitting across from someone that you're in a partnership with, and one side is offended that an approach is different. We're not discussing what the approach should be, but we're upset that what was recommended wasn't taken immediately. that there was some pushback, there were questions that were asked, things like that. That is problematic for our generation.
Yeah.
I don't want to be scared into not pushing, but I also want to know where the boundary is.
Yeah.
And so long as the boundary is you're reminded of it, or you know where it is, I think a little healthy back and forth for those who can handle it, that's the key, is good. It shows ambition. It shows buy-in to an organization. People aren't going to be fighting for decisions and risking internal capital over things that don't matter to them. So I think it's important to recognize that sometimes dissent and pushback and questions are actually rooted in buy-in to growth and not rooted into not buying in at all.
Right.
So sometimes killing that type of energy will actually encourage the very thing that you fear, and that's not being bought into where the direction of the company is going.
Mm-hmm.
People have to feel a part of the journey. That's important, and you can't kill that because that's very hard to redevelop.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I think we've been practicing that here at Zweig Group. And obviously we encourage other firms to do that by getting young people involved in the process from start to finish, buying into the vision, buying into the mission of the organization. And unfortunately in the design industry, and again, I'm not throwing darts, I'm not casting blame, but too often so much happens behind closed doors.
Yep.
In these ostensibly, board of director meetings and key executive leadership meetings where all the decisions are made in a vacuum. And not to say that they're wrong decisions, but it's like, man, you meet out all these ideas and everything, and then you just tell people that have no vested interest in the plan whatsoever.
Absolutely.
That you need to fulfill this. And that's hard to do.
Absolutely. It is.
I think about our all hands on deck meeting that we just had the other day and the importance of that meeting, because everybody walked away feeling invested in the process. And everything that Chad Kleinens, our president and CEO, had a chance to talk about was something that was tangible to each and every person in that room. And it wasn't just the 4 members on the board, saying it, and this is what it is, thus saith us. It's, hey guys, this is what we want to try to do. Want to get your thoughts, want to get your reactions. Here are some things that we're going to be doing moving forward. Here are some new things that we want to implement at the company. Would love to get your thoughts and feedback on this. Here's why we want to do this, and here's why we think it will be beneficial to everyone. And so,
and to figure, one of my favorite, and I'm a quotes guy, one of my favorite quotes on this particular topic is it's David Brooks in Road to Character, talking about the moderate. But he's really kind of talking about leadership and how the lows are lower than the highs are high. And that's always important for a leader to understand. But I think as we're talking about young professionals, it's important for us to keep in mind that, the lows are lower than the highs are high. And from a leadership perspective, approaching decisions, especially as they affect young professionals, the damage that you can do when you get things wrong far exceed the good that you can do when you get things right. And so being careful, understanding personnel and how they're going to take certain decisions is important, and to divorce yourself from that reaction, because it is emotional and you don't like emotions. I don't. But the reality is, as we said in integration of M&A as well, it holds true for internal day-to-day workings and decision-making. Every decision is going to bring some emotional reaction to it because it's change. And so, number one, just because the lows get low doesn't mean the decision was bad. And number two, on the flip side of it, just because you have some immediate highs doesn't mean that ultimately it's going to lead to sustained efficiency or sustained success. So you have to be able to live in the middle and be even keel and not be too discouraged, not be, insecure about decision making, because that's felt too. I will say, kind of one of my ending pieces on the whole young professional millennial thing is people smell indecision nowadays, and insecurity and paranoia and All of those things make young people uncomfortable. Not to say that it doesn't make everyone uncomfortable, but when you're young and you feel confident, which I think is somewhat a characteristic of us, we're probably a little bit more confident than we should be in certain areas. But when you're confident and you're surrounded by either decisions or decision makers who aren't, it kills you. It kills your fire a little bit. And in the industry, I think we have to start talking even more about the opportunities and the successes and how we're helping other people get better and how critical we are to the day-to-day life of just America and other places if you're international. Talking about the positive side of what can be done. I think that'll go a long way in invigorating not only your current employees, but also attracting the talent that this industry needs in the next 10, 20, 30 years. People being excited about what we do and how critical it is to the day-to-day lives of people. So you have to be confident in what you do. Got to be confident in your vision. You got to be consistent in the decisions and the choices that are made in fulfilling that vision. And you got to be comfortable with the pushback and emotions that it's going to stir up. Otherwise, it's just going to be a triage.
Yeah. Man, well, you wrapped that up nice and neatly there. I mean, you've given us a far-reaching and wide-ranging discussion from M&A, the state of affairs currently in the design space, to the Legal Extern program that you so graciously started here at Zweig Group, and then kind of wrapping it up with the Millenial Mindset and just some best practices that you think are important to consider for leaders in the design space that are trying to reach that next generation of talent and impact them in a positive way and not a negative way. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much, man, for coming on and joining us on this podcast. I really, really appreciate it. And you've given us a lot to think about. And as always, you drop some real knowledge whenever you've joined us. So I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And any final thoughts before we close out?
I guess my final thought is to be a little bit more deliberate from a leadership perspective. And that's not just personnel. That's just business development, operational efficiency. Be confident in the decisions, because that's half the battle, is the buy-in. To bring it all full circle from an integration, integration perspective, the same things hold true in the day-to-day operations. You got to be confident. You got to meld everything in as one, and people have to see how the gumbo is going to come together, because it's what it is. It's gumbo. It's a bunch of ingredients that have to dance together.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's it. Well, there you have it, folks. Brenden Sherrer,
I'm glad you shouted out Wright's Barbecue too.
Oh, I know. I had to do that. That's my buddy Jordan, owns Wright's Barbecue there in Johnson, Arkansas. Slowly becoming one of the best barbecue spots in the state. Mm-hmm. Maybe one of the best barbecue spots in the country.
I think it's well on its way.
Yeah, so we will put a plug in there for Wright's Barbecue, and I'll let him know that I did that, and I'll also put a link to Wright's Barbecue. If you're ever in Fayetteville, come see Brenden and I, and we'll take you to Wright's Barbecue, and we'll get some barbecue, and you can enjoy it.
Make sure you tell them I plugged it too.
So right. I will do that. So we'll take care of you. So yeah, nothing like a little free brisket or some of that candy bacon that they have. So
thanks for having me, Randy.
Oh, no problem. Folks, well, there you have it. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Zweig Letter Podcast. I'd be remiss if I did not forget to remind you that we have something special for you. We have a free gift for everyone that listens to the Zweig Letter Podcast, and it's none other than a subscription to the digital edition of the Zweig Letter newsletter. The Zweig Letter newsletter has run consistently and continuously since 1992. It has been a bellwether for our industry when it comes to information. And Mark Zweig has written some of the most amazing articles in the Zweig Letter since 92. So I really want to encourage you to take it and read it, share it with your team. Visit zweiggroup.com. click on the Zweig letter icon, just put your name and your email address in, and you will get a free subscription to the Zweig letter newsletter, which comes out at noon every Monday. You don't want to miss it. It is an amazing newsletter that has a lot of information on the design industry, and that's our gift to you because we believe in giving every chance that we can. The other thing I'd like to remind you to do is when you get a chance, check us out on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, anywhere that you find your really great podcast. Just look up the Zweig Letter Podcast, download us, subscribe to us, share it with a friend, and more importantly than any of that, we would love for you to give us a rating. Give us a 5-star review. Let us know what you think about the podcast, what works, what doesn't work. If there's a topic that you want to hear more about that we could discuss here on the podcast, we're going to be doing some really cool topics coming out in the fall. And then in 2019, I'm going to blow your mind. That's my goal to you, the listener, and we really appreciate your loyalty to this podcast and to all that we're offering here at Zweig Group. You know, our goal really is to elevate this industry one step at a time, and we can't do that without you, the listener. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate it, and please share this episode with a friend. Let them know what the Zweig Letter Podcast is all about. We really appreciate you, and check out the show notes. They'll be available, and if you have any questions about anything that we talked about today, anything that was referenced, all that will be in the show notes, and you'll have access to all those links and all that good information, as well as contact information for Brenden, should you ever want to reach out to him. I'm Randy Wilburn, your host, and this is the Zweig Letter Podcast. You guys make it a great day, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thanks for tuning in to this Zweig Letter Podcast episode. If you want more wisdom and inspiration, in addition to information about M&A, strategic planning, HR, and marketing your firm, subscribe now to the digital version of the Zweig Letter free of charge. Just visit thezweigletter.com/subscribe and leave your email address. Your free subscription will begin immediately.